Welcome to Hockey Whiz Talks podcast. In this podcast, I'll be previewing the Pacific Division in the NHL. In this podcast, I'll be previewing the Pacific Division teams based on the order I think they will finish in the standings from best to worst. The Edmonton Oilers had a busy offseason, making several key moves to bolster their roster for another Stanley Cup run. Not only were the Edmonton Oilers able to bring back the majority of the players that helped them to reach the Stanley Cup finals, they also were able to sign several key free agents as well. As expected, the Edmonton Oilers bought out Jack Campbell and allowed Aaron Fogle and Vincent Desharnais to walk in free agency. The great news is that they were able to re-sign several key free agents such as Adam Henrique, Matthias Janmark, Connor Brown, Corey Perry, Troy Stecher, and Calvin Pickard. This ensures the Oilers will have a great deal of offensive depth to work with, and they'll also have some good defensive depth as well. In free agency, the Edmonton Oilers signed Victor Arvidsson to a 2-year deal worth $4 million per season, and Jeff Skinner to a 1-year deal worth $3 million. Savoy, who is a highly talented prospect, was acquired in a trade from the Buffalo Sabres for Ryan McLeod and Tyler Toledo. The Oilers still have two key RFAs to re-sign in Philip Broberg, who had become a big part of their D-core last year, and Dylan Holloway. Without any cap room remaining, the Oilers have to make a trade to free up some cap space, and it's also a possibility for Evander Kane to end up on LTIR, as he is currently dealing with a hip issue. The Oilers also have to worry about signing Draisaitl and McDavid to a long-term extension, but they especially need to put the finishing touches on a Draisaitl extension before the season starts, as he is a free agent in 2025. The Oilers made significant improvements to their roster, addressing areas of need while retaining key players. The addition of Arvidsson and Skinner provide additional firepower and make them a threat to win the Pacific Division this season. As per Daily Faceoff, the Edmonton Oilers have a first line centered by the best player in the league in Connor McDavid. On his wings are Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Zach Hyman, who was a 50-goal scorer last year. Leon Draisaitl centers the second line with Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner, both new free agent signings. This is definitely one of the best top 6 units in the entire NHL. Adam Henrique centers the third line with Dylan Holloway and Corey Perry on his wings, while Derek Ryan centers the fourth line with Matthias Janmark and Connor Brown. The strength of the Oilers team is their offense, as they were one of the highest scoring teams in the NHL last season, and adding players such as Arvidsson and Skinner will only make the team better from an offensive perspective. While the Oilers defense may be the weakness of the team, there are still some bright spots about the team. Matthias Ekholm and Evan Bouchard are the top D pair. They were one of the best in the league last year, as Bouchard solidified himself as one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. Darnell Nurse is paired with Philip Broberg. They form the second pair, and although they both struggled mightily last year at times, things really started to click in the playoffs last season. The third pair for right now is Brett Kulak and Cody Ceci, but I could see Josh Brown stepping in for Ceci if he is traded. Stuart Skinner will be locked into his role as the starter for the Edmonton Oilers, with Calvin Pickard being the backup. Goalies are also a weakness of the team, with Stuart Skinner having periods of inconsistency, but their offense is usually good enough to overcome it. The Edmonton Oilers enter the 2024-25 season with sky-high expectations after a thrilling run to the Stanley Cup Finals. Their offseason moves have significantly strengthened their roster, making them a formidable force in the Western Conference. The Oilers are undoubtedly one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup this season. Their offensive firepower is unmatched, and they have the potential to put up historic numbers. However, their success will hinge on their defensive improvements and goaltending consistency. A Pacific Division title and a return to the Stanley Cup Finals are realistic goals. The Vancouver Canucks had an active offseason, making significant moves to reshape their roster and building off a strong 2023-24 campaign. Vancouver took care of a few of their own free agents, locking up defenseman Philip Hronek to a 8-year $58 million extension, defenseman Tyler Myers to a 3-year $9 million extension, as well as forwards Dakota Joshua to a 4-year $13 million extension, and Teddy Bluger to a 2-year deal worth $1.8 million per season. Goalie Artur Servos was re-signed to a 2-year deal. In free agency, Vancouver signed 3 ex-Boston Bruins players in Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, and Derek Forbort. DeBrusk got a 4-year, $38.5 million deal. Heinen got a 2-year deal worth $2.5 million per season, while Derek Forbort got a 1-year deal. To improve their depth on the wing, they signed Daniel Sprong and Kiefer Sherwood. The Canucks made significant investments in their core players, improving their depth players, and improved their depth scoring. However, they also lost some key free agents as well, including Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, which sets them back a bit. But it's not enough to say that they aren't a contender in the Pacific Division. As per Daily Faceoff, the Vancouver Canucks have a first line centered by JT Miller, with Brock Besser and Nils Höglander, followed by a second line with Elias Pettersson, Jake DeBrusk, and Daniel Sprong. The Canucks' top 6 is still a work in progress as they try to find the right forward combinations that complement both JT Miller and Elias Pettersson. Their third line was one of the best in the NHL last year and should continue to be that, as they were able to bring back both Dakota Joshua and Teddy Blueger to play alongside the gritty Connor Garland. P.S. Suter centers the fourth line with Danton Heinen and Kiefer Sherwood, but I would not be surprised if Heinen works his way up into the top 6 at some point in this season. The Canucks defense will rely heavily on the top pair of Quinn Hughes and Filip Hronek, as they are paying them top pair money to play in all situations. Tyler Myers was brought back to pair with Carson Soucy on the second pair, while Derek Forbort replaces Nikita Zadorov on the third pair and is paired with Vincent Desharnais. The Vancouver Canucks are backstopped by Thatcher Demko, one of the best goalies in the league and certainly the best in the division. He is backed up by Artur Sivils, who emerged as a solid starter in the NHL in the playoffs last year. So perhaps the Canucks can rest Demko more games to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So perhaps the Canucks can rest Demko more games to keep him fresh for the playoffs. Since the Pacific Division is relatively weak compared to other divisions, with teams like Calgary, LA, and Vegas greatly diminished, Vancouver is still in position to be at worst the second best team in the division, and could even push the Oilers for first. Ultimately, I don't think they will end up first because they are adding several new pieces to the team, and I don't think they have as much top-end talent as Edmonton. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at HockeyWiz777scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/HockeyWiz777scouting. The Seattle Kraken have had a busy offseason so far. They've made significant moves to bolster their roster and prepare for the upcoming season. The Seattle Kraken really improved their prospect pool by selecting Berkeley Catton, 8th overall in the 2024 NHL Draft. Catton is a talented and dynamic forward who can play both center and wing. In order to create cap space to sign free agents, Seattle traded Brian Dumoulin to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a 4th-round pick in 2026. The Kraken made quite a splash in free agency, signing defenseman Brandon Montour and forward Chandler Stevenson to long-term contracts. Brandon Montour, who was fresh off of a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers, cashed in big time, signing a 7-year $50 million deal with Seattle, while Chandler Stevenson, who was a vital piece of Vegas' Stanley Cup team in 2023, signed a 7-year, $43.75 million deal with the Kraken. Seattle still needs to re-sign Matty Beniers, who is an RFA and is a big part of Seattle's core. However, they only have a little over $6.3 million in cap space, so Seattle will need to make a trade or two to create that cap space if they want to lock him up long term. With a much improved roster, the Kraken are poised for a successful season. However, they do face stiff competition in the division against teams like the LA Kings and Vegas Golden Knights. As per Daily Faceoff, Matty Beniers centers the first line with Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle on his wings. While this line doesn't score a ton, when they heat up, they are really good. Newly signed free agent center Chandler Stevenson centers the second line with Jaden Schwartz and Andrei Burakovsky on his wings. This is a good second line, if both Schwartz and Burakovsky can stay healthy. Yanni Gourde, who will be a UFA in 2025, centers the third line with Eeli Tolvanen and Oliver Borkstrand. This was the most dangerous line for Seattle down the stretch of last season. If Yanni Gourde is traded, Shane Wright can step up to play as the third line center. But for now, he is the fourth line center, which is a waste of the former 4th overall pick in 2022. Brandon Tanev and Ty Cartier are on his wings. The bottom 6 of the Kraken could look very different in the event that Gourde and Tanev get traded, which is more likely than not to happen. Seattle has a much improved D-core than last year, with a top 4 of Vince Dunn, Adam Larson, Brandon Montour, and Jamie Oleksiak. These 4 will log heavy minutes, but I also expect Riker Evans and Will Borgen. The strength of the Kraken will definitely be their offense and defensive depth. However, their weakness is that they don't have a bona fide superstar who can take over games. Joey Daccord is slotted to be the 1A for Seattle in net, with Philip Grubauer being the 1B. They will get close to a 50-50 split, and should roll with whichever goalie is hotter at the given moment. With a talented roster and hungry fanbase, the Kraken are poised for a successful season. While making the playoffs should be the goal, establishing themselves as a consistent contender in the Western Conference will be the true measure of their progress. The Kraken may not be as good as teams like Vancouver or Edmonton, but they can certainly compete with teams such as Vegas and LA for the 3rd seed in the division. The Los Angeles Kings have had a busy offseason marked by significant roster changes. The team has made several moves aimed at improving their chances of playoff contention. But have they done enough? The biggest move this offseason was acquiring Darcy Kemper from the Washington Capitals in exchange for Pierre-Luc Dubois. This was a shocking move, considering how bad both of these contracts are. It does end up benefiting both teams. The Kings also added forward Tanner Jeannot in a trade from the Tampa Bay Lightning, which adds grit and physicality to their bottom 6. The Kings lost key players such as Matt Roy, Victor Arvidsson, and Blake Lizotte in free agency, and also traded away Carl Grundstrom. In free agency, LA signed several key free agents such as forward Warren Foegele and defenseman Joel Edmundson. Foegele was signed to a 3-year deal worth $3.5 million per season, while Joel Edmundson signed a 4-year $15.4 million deal. Perhaps the biggest signing this offseason was locking up Quinton Byfield to a 4-year $31.25 million deal. He is an essential part of the Kings core and might take another step forward in 24-25. The Kings' offseason moves have been aggressive, but their impact remains to be seen. While the Kings addressed some positions of need, there are still some question marks surrounding their overall direction. As per Daily Faceoff, the LA Kings have a first line centered by the ultra-reliable Anze Kopitar. On his wings are Quinton Byfield and Adrian Kempe. This is a very underrated first line, which quietly puts up very good numbers. Kevin Fiala stars on the second line with Philip Deneau and Trevor Moore. While Deneau remains a reliable defensive center, his offensive production has diminished. Alex Turcotte will start the year as the third line center, with newly signed winger Warren Foegele on his left and Alex Lafreniere on his right. Tanner Jeannot joins Trevor Lewis and Arthur Kaliyev on the fourth line. This is an effective fourth line, and although it's a waste to see a talent like Kaliyev on it, it works. Drew Doughty anchors the defense. Joining him on the first pair is the underrated Mikey Anderson. Brant Clark, a highly touted prospect, is expected to be a full-time contributor this season. He is paired alongside Vladislav Gavrikov. Rounding out the defense is Joel Edmundson and Jordan Spence on the third pair. Darcy Kemper will get the opportunity to be the starter for the LA Kings, with the backup being David Rittich. Phoenix Copley will also see some playing time at some point in the season. Overall, this team is solid, but there are some question marks about the team, such as offensive depth and goaltending. The Los Angeles Kings embark on a new chapter with a revamped roster after a significant offseason overhaul. The acquisition of Darcy Kemper in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade is a major gamble, but it could pay dividends if the veteran netminder can regain his Vezina winning form. Overall, the 2024-25 season promises to be an interesting one for Kings fans. While the team faces uncertainties, there is potential for significant growth and success. Ultimately, though, the Kings could also miss out on the playoffs depending on how teams like Seattle and Vegas do. The Vegas Golden Knights experienced a significant overhaul during the 2024 offseason. The team faced a major challenge with the departure of several key players, most notably 2023 Conn Smythe winner Jonathan Marchessault and Chandler Stevenson, who was also a vital part of their top 6 and cup-winning core. Goaltender Logan Thompson, who was traded away to Washington after he demanded a trade, while Paul Cotter was traded alongside a third-round pick in the 2025 draft for Alexander Holtz and Akira Schmid, two young players who showed flashes of potential but haven't put it all together yet. In free agency, Vegas signed Victor Olofsson to a one-year deal. This is a low-risk, high-reward signing, as Olofsson played with Eichel in Buffalo and had a bit of success. Hopefully, they can refine that success and chemistry. Ilya Samsonov, who had previously played in Toronto, was signed to a one-year deal. This could end up being one of the best signings if it pans out. Two young players to watch this upcoming season are Brandon Brisson and Alexander Holtz, acquired in the Devils trade. These two players were highly touted prospects, but have yet to live up to their draft expectations. However, they are still young and still have time to be solid pros. Overall, the offseason was marked by significant changes for the Vegas Golden Knights. The team might be in a rebuilding phase as they work to integrate new players and develop their young talent. As per Daily Faceoff, Vegas has a first line that is still a work in progress, with Jack Eichel centering Ivan Barbashev on his left and Victor Olofsson on his right, at least for the start of the season. Bruce Cassidy is known for rotating wingers alongside two star players. Eichel and Barbashev are going to be the fixture on the first line, while Thomas Hertl and Mark Stone will be the fixture on the second line, if Stone is healthy. So they'll try many different combinations of wingers, including Victor Olofsson, Pavel Dorofeyev, Alexander Holtz, and Brandon Brisson. For the time being though, Pavel Dorofeyev is joining Thomas Hertl and Mark Stone on the second line. Another thing to watch with the second line is if and when Mark Stone gets injured. I could see William Karlsson being pushed onto the second line, with Thomas Hertl sliding over to the wing. William Karlsson is slotted as the third line center, with Brandon Brisson and Alexander Holtz on his wing. Although Karlsson is a very good player, he will have his work cut out for him if he has two very inexperienced players on his wings. So I ultimately think that Brett Howden might work his way onto his wing. Vegas has the benefit of having an overqualified fourth line center in Nikolai Waugh, who can move up and down the lineup. Last season, he played as high as on the first line when Eichel and Hertl were out. As of right now, Nikolai Waugh is centering the fourth line with Brett Howden and Keegan Kolazar. This is an excellent fourth line and might be their most balanced line. While their offense may still be a work in progress, their defense is still very good, with a top four made up of Alex Pietrangelo, Noah Hanifin, Shea Theodore, and Brady McNabb. With those four logging the majority of the minutes, they only need Zach Whitecloud and Nicholas Hague to fill in if the top four get injured. Aiden Hill and Ilya Samsonov are the goalie tandem moving forward for Vegas. Although Vegas does look decent on paper, there are a ton of question marks about the team, and if any of the core players get hurt, their depth is not as good as it was last year to withstand that. The Vegas Golden Knights are the toughest team to predict in the Pacific Division, because while they boost a talented roster with the likes of Jack Eichel, Thomas Hertl, Mark Stone, William Karlsson, Ivan Barbashev, Alex Pietrangelo, and Noah Hanifin, they also have more question marks about their roster than they do answers, which is why I can't put them in the playoffs over a team like LA or Seattle, who have both improved. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywiz777. The Calgary Flames have been active this offseason, making several moves to position themselves as a rebuilding team, while creating tons of cap space. The biggest transaction this offseason for the Calgary Flames was dealing Jacob Markstrom to the New Jersey Devils for Kevin Ball and a top 10 protected 2025 first round pick. At the 2024 NHL Draft, the Calgary Flames improved their prospect pool by adding defenseman Zane Parak 9th overall, right winger Matvei Gridin 25th overall, and Andrew Basha in the second round. Calgary locked up Yegor Sharangovich to a 3-year deal worth $5.75 million per season. In free agency, the Flames signed Anthony Mantha and Ryan Lomberg to help bolster their offensive depth, Jake Bean to improve the defense, and Devin Cooley to bolster their goaltending depth. Dustin Wolf is expected to be the starter for Calgary this season, with Dan Vladar and Devin Cooley also in the mix. How quickly Dustin Wolf gets acclimated to the NHL and becomes an NHL level starter will dictate how well the Flames do this year. The Calgary Flames are in the midst of a rebuild after making the decision to trade away key veterans and acquire draft picks. This season is expected to be challenging, but also presents an opportunity for young talent to emerge. As per Daily Faceoff, the Calgary Flames have a very weak first line centered by their captain and longtime Flame Mikael Backlund, with Jonathan Huberdeau and Blake Coleman on his wings. I can't imagine this being the first line the entire season. Yegor Sharangovich, who had a breakout year with 31 goals in the 23-24 campaign with Calgary, centers the second line with Connor Zary and Anthony Mantha at the moment, but I can see Andrei Kuzmenko being bumped up to this line. Nazem Kadri centers the third line with Martin Pospisil and Andrei Kuzmenko. I think Mantha is better suited on the third line than Kuzmenko. Kevin Rooney centers the fourth line with Ryan Lomberg and Walker Duar. The Calgary Flames do have 4 solid lines that are solid defensively. Unfortunately, they are not always consistent when it comes to goal scoring. For that reason, Calgary might be one of the lowest scoring teams in the league next year. Their first D pair with Mackenzie Weegar and Daniil Marimanov is pretty good. Rasmus Andersson is on the second pair with Kevin Ball, while Jake Bean is paired with Brandon Peschel on the third pair. Calgary's defense is good, but still a work in progress. So it will be a long season, since they will not have the luxury of having Jacob Markstrom in net anymore. As I touched on briefly before, their goalies will be a 3-man rotation of Dustin Wolf, Dan Vladar, and Devin Cooley. While it has promised, none of these goalies are proven starters. The 2024-25 season is likely to be a tough one for the Flames. However, it's essential to view this season as a building block for the future. The focus should be on player development and setting the foundation for long-term success. The Pacific Division is very weak, but since the Calgary Flames have so many young players and so many question marks entering the season, it is hard for me to put them over any team other than Anaheim and San Jose. While the Anaheim Ducks didn't land any major free agents in the 2024 offseason, their moves were calculated and focused on improving the team's depth and experience. They weaponized their cap space, adding veterans such as Brian Dumoulin from Seattle and Robbie Fabry from Detroit via trades to improve the depth on the roster. In the 2024 NHL Draft, they strengthened their prospect pool by drafting Becca Sinecki 3rd overall, as well as Stian Solberg, a physical Norwegian-born defenseman 23rd overall, and Lucas Pettersson, a Swedish-born center 35th overall. A new addition to the lineup this season is Cutter Gauthier, who was initially drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers 5th overall and was acquired in a trade for Jamie Drysdale. The Ducks will have a young core with significant potential, but it remains to be seen how quickly they can develop into a playoff contender. The Ducks have a promising future with a strong prospect pool and a young, talented core. While the 24-25 season might be another step in the rebuilding process, there is optimism about the team's long-term prospects. As per Daily Faceoff, the Anaheim Ducks have a very talented first line made up of 2 former top 5 picks in Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier. On the other wing is Troy Terry, who quietly has been one of the most productive Ducks the past 2 years. Trevor Zegras centers the second line with Ryan Strome and Frank Vatrano, which is a very talented line, but with the trade rumors circulating around both Vatrano and Zegras, I don't know how long this line will stick. The third line is Mason McTavish centering veteran forwards Robbie Fabry and Alex Killorn. I expect McTavish to eventually be the second line center as the season progresses, and when Frank Vatrano eventually gets traded. The fourth line center is Isaac Ludestrom. On his wings are Ross Johnston and Brett Leeson. The defense of the Ducks is still a work in progress, but the first pair should be Cam Fowler and Brian Dumoulin. After the first pair, the other 2 pairs are still subject to change. But as of right now, Urho Vakanainen is paired with Rocco Gudis on the second pair, while Pavel Mentyukov is on the third pair with Jackson Lecombe. The defense is definitely a weakness for the Anaheim Ducks, and will be the reason why they continue to be one of the worst teams in the league. Despite the statistics shown, goaltending is one of the strengths of the Anaheim Ducks. John Gibson and Lucas Dostal are both starting caliber goalies in the NHL. It's just that the team in front of them is not that good. The Anaheim Ducks are in the midst of a rebuild, but there are promising signs for the future. With a talented young core and a strong prospect line, the Ducks are poised to take steps forward in the 24-25 season. With a strong draft class and continued improvement from young players, the Ducks are on the right track. but still are a few years away from being contenders. With that said, the Anaheim Ducks should be one of the worst teams in the Pacific Division and will be in the lottery once again this year. Listen to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast on Podbean and Spotify. Check out my travel channel at youtube.com/HockeyWizTravels. The San Jose Sharks have been active this offseason, making several moves to rebuild their roster. Of course, the Sharks had the first overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft, and they drafted Macklin Celebrini, a highly touted prospect who has the potential to be a franchise center for them. Besides Celebrini, they were also able to draft Sam Dickinson 11th overall, and Igor Chershunov 33rd overall, and Leo Salin Wallenius 53rd overall, all of whom are highly touted prospects in their own right. With a ton of cap space to work with, they utilized it to improve their roster, picking up Barclay Goodrow from waivers after he was cut by the New York Rangers, as well as Jake Wallman and Ty Dellandrea in trades from the Detroit Red Wings and Dallas Stars. Despite being a team in rebuild, the Sharks were aggressive in the free agency market and signed Tyler Toffoli to a 4-year, $24 million deal and Alexander Wennberg to a 2-year deal worth $5 million per season. Will Smith, who was the 4th overall pick for the Sharks in 2023, is expected to be a big part of the team this year, and although very talented, might experience some growing pains. The Sharks are clearly in rebuilding mode, focusing on acquiring young talent and developing their prospects. While the team might not be a playoff contender this year, these moves lay the groundwork for future success. As per Daily Faceoff, the San Jose Sharks have a newly formed first line centered by 2024 first overall pick Macklin Celebrini, with newly signed free agent Tyler Toffoli on his left and Fabian Zetterlund on his right. Mikael Granlund centers the second line with William Eklund and Will Smith on his wings. Although their top 6 is highly skilled, it is very inconsistent because of the young players, as young players can be prone to mistakes and growing pains. Alexander Wennberg centers the third line with Thomas Bordeleau and Luke Cunnin. This is a newly formed third line. Captain Logan Couture is technically still on the roster, but it is uncertain if and when he will be able to play for the team. With 3 new looking lines, it will take some time for the players to gel and for the Sharks to find the proper line combinations. Their fourth line is likely to be the most consistent line. It consists of Barclay Goodrow, Nico Sturm, and Ty Dellandrea. The Sharks' defense is still a work in progress as well, with a core which consists of Mario Ferraro, Ty Emberson, Jake Wallman, Jan Ruda, Henry Thune, and Mark-Edward Vlasic. Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek, who just so happen to be 2 ex-New Jersey Devils goalies, will be the goalie tandem for the Sharks. They will have their work cut out for them, with a young team and a subpar defense in front of them. The San Jose Sharks are embarking on a new chapter in their franchise's history. With a roster overhaul and a focus on youth, the team is clearly in a rebuild mode. The Sharks face a tough road ahead. Competing in the competitive Western Conference will be challenging, and the fans should expect growing pains. San Jose is ultimately expected to be one of, if not the worst team in the Pacific Division, and perhaps even the entire league. In my next podcast, I'll be talking about rookies to watch out for this upcoming season.